And now joining me to discuss the implications of this on Mexican-U.S. relations is Patricio Zamorano, political analyst and editor of InfoAmericas.info. Thank you so much, Patricio, for joining me. Let's talk about the newest revelation that the U.S. has hacked former Mexican President Felipe Calderon's email. Last month, it was also revealed that the U.S. accessed text messages sent by President Enrique Peña Nieto. We received this official statement in response to these revelations. The government of Mexico reiterates its categorical condemnation of the violation of the privacy of communications of Mexican institutions and private citizens. This practice is unacceptable and runs contrary to Mexican and international law. Patricio, tell us more about the response from the Mexican government and the Mexican people to all of this.
Well, Mexico in general is extremely sensitive to any kind of foreigner intervention. So in this case, especially, it's shocking the fact that Felipe Calderon, the former president of the country, was a close ally of the U.S., maybe one of the closest ones in the last decades. So for the Mexican society, this revelation is really is actually showing the lack of trust that the U.S. has, especially under the Felipe Calderon's policy against the narco dealers. So in this case, it sounds like it was actually unnecessary to perform this kind of espionage in an ally that was extremely close. And the same case with Peña Nieto. Peña Nieto is actually trying to reform the policy on security issues, especially immigration, very sensitive issues for both Mexico and the U.S. So this subject is extremely polemic, and because of the Snowden documents also, is that the U.S. was trying to spy in several aspects, more subjects, not only security, but for economic reasons, trying to find out more like the inner circle knowledge of what was going on within Peña Nieto and Calderon's team, Secretary of State, ministers, etc., etc. So what we can see is we are not talking about a threat. We are not talking about the security issue. We are talking about economics. We're talking about advantage in terms of policies, trying to find out even more. And in this case, it's not only Mexico. In the Brazilian case, it's extremely uncomfortable for the Brazilian government, because actually President Dilma Rousseff was actually planning to come to the U.S. The first Brazilian president in decades was going to come to the U.S. to pay back the visit that President Obama performed a couple of years ago. So President Rousseff actually canceled her trip, and that's a big crisis for the.
And I wanted to jump in because I wanted to ask you specifically about that. We know the NSA has also extended its reach to Brazil. Dilma Rousseff canceled her trip, like you said. How do you really compare the Mexican response to the Brazilian response? Do you think the Brazilian government has been much more angry over this?
Yes. Actually, it's actually different. I think in terms of Peña Nieto, his position is very uncomfortable, because we are talking about like a neighbor country. We have a very important pending issue, immigration. We have to remember that a big percentage of undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. are from Mexico. But in terms of Brazil, Brazil has its own agenda, its own policies. It's trying to fight to be considered an equal partner with the U.S. And Brazil is not sharing any border with the U.S. And in fact, Brazil has been stronger on its answer to these accusations. And the fact that President Dilma Rousseff canceled an official invitation to the U.S., it shows how serious the Brazilian government is taking this accusation. They are absolutely not willing to provide any kind of space, political space, to the U.S. to continue with this spying on countries that actually consider themselves allies, partners
Sure.
of the U.S.
And Patricio, I wanted to ask you a question dovetailing off that. You know, what kind of effect do you think this is really going to have going forward on the relations diplomatically? Do you think this is powerful enough to really turn allies into enemies here?
No, at that level, I think the common agenda and the common sense is really strong. The U.S. needs Brazil big time in terms of very key issues, energy, security, etc., etc. Brazil actually is a factor of moderation between the U.S. and the rest of the countries of Latin America. So I think what we have now is a situation where the government of the United States has to be very active, trying to apologize, trying to ensure or deliver any kind of guarantees that this is not going to happen again. Brazil actually is even thinking about building its own infrastructure based on internet in their own soil, so they don't have to pass through the United States when an email is sent from Brazil to Europe, for example. So they are really trying to make sure that that's not going to happen. But the U.S. has the technology to penetrate maybe in any server in the world. So what we need now is a political commitment from the U.S. government, and especially from President Obama, that this is not going to happen again.
Sure.
Otherwise, the relationship with such an important country as Brazil is going to be affected for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Patricio Zamorano, political analyst and editor of InfoAmericas.info. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.